Graptolites are one of the most common groups of Ordovician and Silurian fossils, but there's still an extraordinary amount that we just don't understand about them. So Lucy's joining me again for this one, because Graptolites are kind of her thing. It takes all sorts. But even so, I don't think we're going to get to a definite answer on this one. So let's have a look at Synrhabdosomes, and why this is completely wrong. Hands up if you remember what Graptolites are. Yeah, there's always one. Actually, there's quite a few of you. Oh, well done. Actually, not everyone though. Look at that lot at the back. Right, anyway.
They'll learn.
They will, quite quickly. If you have never come across them before, then we have a quite thorough introduction video to them, which is actually by far the most popular video we've done so far. So the link's in the description. Feel free to go and have a look at that one first, and it'll give you a good grounding in these actually quite amazing things, though I hate to admit it. But in case anyone doesn't have time for that and really doesn't have a clue what we're talking about, Lucy, what are Graptolites?
Right, they are animals. They are colonial animals, and they, in almost all cases, make a organic housing to live in. So Graptolites, they're largely an extinct group. Their living relatives are the pterodactyls in the phylum Hemichordata, and you probably won't know about them unless you know quite a lot about zoology, so don't worry about that bit. And the extinct Graptolites, or the extinct members of the group, some of them lived in the seafloor, which we call benthic ones. Some of them lived in the water column, which we call planktonic ones. And today we're talking about the planktonic ones. We can come back to the benthic ones another time because they're amazing too, in a different way. And in the planktonic ones, you start with the original animal of the colony, the founding member, which lives in a little triangular house thing called the sicula, which it secretes around itself. You get a rod growing out of the tip of the sicula called the nema. And in some Graptolites, that doesn't really go any further. In some Graptolites, it gets quite long and you get the entire colony growing along it. You also have coming out of the sicula a spine called the radial in a lot of Graptolites. Not all, but a lot of them. We'll be coming back to that one as well later. There will be a test. So you have the sicula with the nema, with the radial in a lot of cases. And then you get the rest of the colony growing out from that. And you could have a number of branches in Graptolite colonies ranging from one to many.
Nice.
And Joe's going to put up a few nice pictures of Graptolites.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good basic introduction. So, if you look up Graptolites in a popular book or on a website, you will very commonly see a reconstruction that is quite spectacular and jellyfish looking, which looks like this. Lucy obviously really loves the idea of this.
No!
And we actually have seen these in new museum displays with high budgets and so on. It's a very pervasive image of what Graptolites look like. Is it right?
No, it is completely and utterly wrong. And we know it's been wrong for decades. Please stop.
So, go on, explain. Why is it wrong?
Okay, going back to the history of it a little bit, this comes from the work of a man called Reutemann, who was the state paleontologist for New York in the early part of the 20th century. He did a huge amount of work, much of it quite good, on the fossils and the geology of New York. And he really liked his Graptolites. He named a lot of Graptolites because you've got a lot of Ordovician and Silurian rocks in New York State. And in some of the Graptolites he described, you've got lots of straight colonies with two branches back to back, so they just look like a little twig. And in some cases you find them sort of all arranged in a circle, sort of with the nema tangled together in the middle, or at least overlapping each other in the middle. And these are not uncommon, and they're what this video is about. But where it gets a bit interesting is that Reutemann allegedly had a sort of visual problem that meant he sometimes saw things that were not there. And we are aware that sometimes he interpreted structures that other people would have said oh, it's just a blob, oh, it's just a bit of pyrite, oh, it's just random. And that's what he did with these Synrhabdosomes, as he called them. You know, rhabdosome, the Graptolite colony, and Syn meeting together. So rhabdosomes together, colonies together. It's not rocket science. But what he thought he saw were lots of what he called pneumophores, or pneumatophores, which are big floats in the centre of these colonies. So he produced this lovely reconstruction based on what he genuinely saw, which was these Graptolite colonies, all sort of the nematodes together, forming a sort of arrangement with big floats in the middle. And this was such a good image that everyone who is not a Graptolite worker is still using it. Please, please, just don't.
Unfortunately, people have gone back to those specimens and there's nothing there. Those bubbles do not exist. And this image has been embellished over the years as well. It's now become much more like a jellyfish-like bell with a ring of floats around the edge. And it just doesn't exist. It never has done. So, yeah, it looks nice, which is, I guess, why people keep using it. But
well,
it's not really real.
Of course, if you just do an internet search for Graptolites and how they lived, that's what you get. So of course everyone keeps using it, and so it comes up in the internet searches.
And it's not generally done by academics at all now, it's fair to say. That I think there has been quite a campaign for decades to stamp this heresy out, but but it's not really working, so hopefully it will after this, but I don't think we'll quite reach the mass millions we need.
Yeah, this microviral, you never know.
Yes, it's possible.
The other thing, while we're on the subject, is you'll often see a reconstruction of a Graptolite colony, you know, a nice straight one, or maybe a V-shaped one, with the nema growing out the sicula, and the nema will be quite long and attached to seaweed. There is absolutely no evidence for that either. Stop doing that one as well, please.
Okay, that's, I think, most of the please out of the way. And now we get on to the really interesting bit.
Yes.
Because there is a grain of truth to it.
Mm-hmm.
The bubbles and the floats, no evidence for whatsoever, and there probably would have been by now if there actually was anything of that sort. But Synrhabdosomes are real. And they're actually incredibly interesting structures with all sorts of debates that can be had around them, trying to work out what they were. Because, well, let's have a look first, because we've actually got a couple of them. They're not the best ones ever, both on one slab from a place that is known to produce them. So let's have a good look at what we're actually talking about, and then we'll get on to the possible explanations for these structures, to use the vaguest possible term. Right, let's go look. So what are we looking at here?
Right, so we have a Graptolite, well, two Graptolites. We have one lying horizontally near the bottom of the image and one almost horizontally at the top. So on the left, the sicula is not quite preserved. The sicula, of course, the first individual of the colony. And in this type of Graptolite, this is a monograptid, it's of Silurian age. It's one of the types in which the colony grew along the nema. So in this case, you've got one branch with one row of thecae, and the thecae grew in sequence along the nema. So all the little sort of sawtooth edges there that you're seeing, each of those in life would have been a little cylinder stacked on top of each other at an angle, and in each cylinder there was, we think, one animal living. And so you can see the colony got wider quite rapidly once it started to grow.
Cool. So let's move it along and see what, follow it to the end.
Yep, there we go.
Keep going. There's another one above it. There's a few more Graptolites joining in the party. Oh, so you say the nema should be a straight line coming out the end, shouldn't it?
It can be a bit bent. Sometimes you get veins and things on them, but in general, if you find a single well-preserved Graptolite, the nema will just be coming out the end straight or a bit curved.
So this tangle here.
That's a bit weird, isn't it? Because there seem to be more nemata, that's the plural of nema, than there are of Graptolites.
Yeah, so shall we move this around, show the whole thing? See, there's more Graptolites coming from the top, and go down to the bottom as well, or the right. There's more coming in from that side too. So it's going off the edge of the slab there, and coming in from the bottom too. So you actually got at least a dozen Graptolites here, all of the same type as far as we can see, which is universally typical. They're always the same species.
As far as is known, yes. No one's ever described a Synrhabdosome with more than one species of Graptolite in. which is really interesting.
We will come back to that.
But I will also point out that in general, if you have a Synrhabdosome, it's a single species and they tend to be, in almost all cases, of the same growth stage, so they're the same size. In this case, however, let's go back to the Graptolite that we were looking at first, which is quite a nice one. And you can see in the left, in the first few thecae, that's what we call the little individual tubes, the thecae. In the first few thecae of the colony, they've got spines coming off. You can put an arrow to them.
Yep.
And then the thecae further up haven't got spines. And this is quite typical of this type of Graptolite. And in the Graptolite above, you can see the same thing. The first few thecae have spines, the rest of the thecae, no spines. Right, let's go back to the centre of the Synrhabdosome, to this tangle. And then let's look at this individual here on the right. It's got spines.
Oh, how interesting.
It's a juvenile.
Oh, well spotted.
So
That is peculiar.
here we have what seems to be a Synrhabdosome with Graptolites of multiple growth stages in.
This is unscripted. Real science happening as we look.
This is a new observation. This is the first time we put water on the specimen as well as across polars. So we're seeing just a little bit of extra detail.
Yeah, and it's the first time we've actually looked at this specimen under these new microscopes where we have the cross polarization. Normally there's so much glare and speckling on it that you can't see this detail. But okay, right, so that's interesting. But let's have a look at this tangle. Let's zoom in, see what there is to see in there.
Right, let's get this adjusted. Right, and let's zoom. Okay, so that's a lot of bits of Nema.
That's a lot more bits of Nema than there are Graptolites.
Looks like it. The kind of Nema that's quite long and gets tangles.
So wrapped round on itself, maybe. Is there any sign of these branching? Are they? There are definitely some that are bent and sort of tangled, but
some are thicker than others.
that is true. So
let's zoom in a little bit further.
yeah, I like this one at the top here.
The very thin one.
The very thin one that's bent round like a shepherd's crook.
Let's concentrate on that one. Yes. So on the left there, you've actually got the bit of the Nema that's buried in the Graptolite.
Yeah.
Within the colony. And then you've got the free bit of the Nema that's coming out and then is bending downwards.
Yeah. So how flexible is the Nema in Graptolites?
Oh, pretty flexible. You often get them preserved quite... It's not unusual to see one bent like that, preserved on a bedding plane.
Okay.
It was quite thin, it was made of organic stuff, so it flexes.
It's just a question of, if you bend it that far, does it spring back again? Or does it sort of kink? Does it flex? If it's just difficult to see how you get something bent like that and then staying in that form. Because they're quite elastic things, aren't they?
Well, we don't know, do we?
They've been dissolved out of rock, and then they're still springy, I believe.
Yes.
We don't know
The
if that
whole
was the
colony
original. Yes.
Yes, you have to be a bit careful. But yeah, they were probably quite flexible in life. But then, of course, however this thing formed, at one point these Graptolites were in the water column, living freely, and now they're buried in rock. So that process of getting buried might have involved things getting bent. This might not reflect the orientation of the Nema within life.
That's very true. Yeah, it's just a question of whether you can get this thing bent and then held in that position. What the forces are that are relative to the strength of the Nema to spring back again. And I think it's an interesting question which we probably can't answer, but it's something to bear in mind. Is you could argue that should have sprung back into place, unless it was sort of embedded in sediment and forced that way and then held there by the surrounding sediment.
To me, and this is just my opinion, that just looks like it's a bending that happened during burial.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessarily got any biological meaning. This is one of these things where you'd want lots of specimens and see if this sort of thing happens consistently.
Yeah. Or whether it is something you tend to see in Synrhabdosomes rather than in isolated specimens.
That's definitely a comparison you'd want to make.
Yes. Let's have another look round, because people are getting bored with this image by now.
And I'm going to zoom in a little more here.
Oh yeah.
There we go. Can Can we make this a little bit later, perhaps?
Yep. Let's overexpose it slightly.
Ah, that's quite informative, I think.
Right.
Yes, so we're seeing the organic material here much more clearly now that we've taken away some of the background colour that's on the rock. And I think in the middles there, you do seem to have a bit where perhaps the Nemo is branching, or it looks like it's folded round on itself. That looks like it's bent round on itself, I think. And that's much thicker than the Nemo that we just looked at, where it was immediately coming out of the Graptolite.
Yeah. It's either one that's bent round that's really thick, or it's two that are really thick next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another one coming off at sort of 1:30, you know, towards the upper right, which is equally thick, which I don't think is the same one, because it ties around in a knot and goes up that way. And then there's another bit there. There are other thick bits as well. And yet there are others which are incredibly thin.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very variable width.
Yes. So again, you'd want to look at isolated examples, just single specimens of whatever the species is, to see whether it's one of the ones where the Nemo grows out and then is thickened away from the colony, which does sometimes happen.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so that's a Synrhabdosome. There are two completely opposed schools of thought as to what these things actually were. On the one hand, that they are real. They are biological structures, they are deliberate associations of colonies forming a sort of super colony for some purpose or other. The other option is that they are complete artifacts that are basically tangled masses that happen somehow and end up being preserved as Synrhabdosomes. And this has been debated for quite a few decades now, and as yet I think it's fair to say that there is no consensus. That some people think it's more likely to be one, some the other. And it's quite a fun little problem. So what we're going to do is go through some of the arguments that can give us information that might help to inform us of what's going on. Because they're fascinating things. And it's quite a big mystery to have. So, okay, one thing we've mentioned already, monospecific or polyspecific.
I am not aware of any described Synrhabdosomes containing more than one species.
And I think I've seen it stated elsewhere as well that they are always a single species.
Yep.
Okay, now this is potentially interesting because Graptolites often occur in populations of multiple species.
Or at least on a bedding plane, you might get multiple species of Graptolites. If different species inhabited, say, different depths in the water column, they might not have been living together in exactly the same place.
What about timing?
Also, you might see some sort of time averaging on the seafloor where you get different Graptolites in different years or different seasons. It's something that's very, very difficult to get a handle on in the fossil record.
This is actually a really important wider point that's worth emphasising because it's often overlooked that on geological timescales, if you're really lucky, you can see annual sort of laminations. But even that is a longer timescale than your normal sort of biological population timescale. So you might get 2 or 3 species of Graptolite living in exactly the same part of the water column in different months through the year. They may occur in swarms that just sort of drift through at particular times following the currents. We don't know on that scale whether they were living simultaneously. But it would be pretty contrived to have none of them mixed up with each other.
But also, in at least some described cases of Synrhabdosomes, you do get just monospecific assemblages.
You do.
So it's not like you get a diverse bedding plane assemblage and one species is in Synrhabdosomes. Certainly if you get abundant Synrhabdosomes, it tends to be you just get one species there.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm just trying to think where we got this from. A little village in mid-Wales. There, it is known for Synrhabdosomes, and I'm pretty certain there are multiple species at that site.
But in the same beds?
Not sure, because unfortunately it's a vertical walled quarry, and you're looking through loose blocks. So it's actually very difficult to tell. So this is something where you'd think we would know categorically, but the patterns are slightly ambiguous because of the potential for time averaging.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had a living population of things, multiple species with nemas that were all living at the same time in the same place, and it was fortuitous, you would expect to get multiple species in a Synrhabdosome. But we can't prove all those factors. Okay, next. So do you get assemblages with a few perfect Synrhabdosomes and lots of things that aren't in Synrhabdosomes?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I think in general you might just get 1 or 2 Synrhabdosomes in a collecting spree, and then you have lots of individual colonies as well. What we don't know, of course, is that some of the individual colonies might have been in Synrhabdosomes that fell apart. How would we tell?
Yes. Well, that one looks pretty tangly, so if they were as tangled as that, it must be quite hard for them to fall apart. You would think.
Except that, let's just say that Synrhabdosomes are completely random. And they don't form in the water column, they form on the bedding plane. Just that if you've got an awful lot of Graptolites falling to the water column and landing on each other, some of them are going to form with the nemata overlapping, and those are the ones that a Graptolite worker is going to come along and go, ooh, it's a Synrhabdosome. And oh, that one over there, oh, there's just a lot of individuals on that bedding plane, it's not interesting.
I'm thinking of examples where it is clear-cut, that you have sort of a really nice tight Synrhabdosome of 20-odd specimens all in a nice radial array, and the bedding plane is otherwise pretty much covered by current-aligned ones. I think is quite common as well, that the Graptolites are all lined up in the same direction because that's the way the current was flowing.
Mm-hmm.
I did read somewhere, I think this is right, is it?
I think that's the Lentz and Gutierrez-Marco paper.
Could well be that, yeah, you tend to get these things, Synrhabdosomes occurring where you have current alignment of the Graptolites in the background.
Mm.
But current alignment in Graptolites is actually very common.
Yep.
And we haven't seen any or noticed any where we got that specimen from.
We haven't done much collecting there, I think it's fair to say.
True.
And it's difficult to see bedding planes because of the way the rock is. So,
but then we also do see slabs with a lot of current alignment. I'm thinking nice big exposure that we found last year.
Yes.
You know, square metre coverage, covered in Graptolites, not a single trace of a Synrhabdosome.
Yeah.
And then you get other ones where they're actually quite rare things. That you have large areas with hardly any Graptolites, and then 1 or 2 perfect Synrhabdosomes.
Mm-hmm.
So that, to me, points more towards biological. It's difficult to explain all those different circumstances leading to occasional Synrhabdosomes, either when there's lots of Graptolites there or where there's no other Graptolites there.
Okay, but if this Synrhabdosomes formed biologically,
yeah,
how did they form? Graptolites could move themselves to the water column, almost certainly, because they must have at least been able to move themselves up. Otherwise, some of the ones that lived for decades, how did they manage to stay floating that long? Mm-hmm. But they can't have been very good swimmers. They can't have just manoeuvred each other like you're docking with an aircraft carrier or something.
How much information do we have on the actual detailed soft tissue of planktic Graptolite zooids?
Well, pretty much none.
We know that there's a lot of specialisation of individual zooids, see the previous video, because some produce spines, which is consistent within the species, and so on, others don't. So what's to say there weren't some that developed at a certain stage that had paddles and were specialised swimming zooids?
Even if that happens, a Graptolite colony is not a hydrodynamically streamlined thing. I don't think they can have been that manoeuvrable.
Maybe they don't need to be very manoeuvrable, but just manoeuvrable enough that they, if they come into close proximity, you have zooids sitting on the nema and sort of grabbing hold of the next nema that comes along and tangling it a bit, or adding some soft tissue to glue them together. Then the next one joins up. Okay,
but it takes time to secrete soft tissue. How do you hold the nemata together long enough that you can get this soft tissue joining? Bear in mind, you're in the water column, things are sinking, things are rising, things are being turbulent.
Maybe not turbulent if they were relatively deep in the water.
Maybe not.
Yeah, and it could be as simple as spitting out some sort of sticky substance, which is just enough to hold them together.
That's getting very speculative.
It is, totally, but we're in the realms of speculation here.
And the other thing is that if Graptolites are in a Synrhabdosome, bear in mind that Synrhabdosomes are almost always found in graptolites that grow along the nema. So either these, like this Cetograptus we saw, which there's one row of thecae growing along the nema, one branch, or in biserial graptolites where you've got two rows of thecae growing along the nema back to back, producing a sort of structure that looks like an ear of wheat. So they grow along the nema. The nema is the bit that's tangled together or held together or something in the centre of the synrhabdosome. So if the colony continues to grow, eventually it can't, because it's going to be blocked by all the other nemata. And what we do not see, as far as I know, is a synrhabdosome in which all the colonies are going together in the middle. There's always a space in the middle.
I think that's wrong.
Go on.
So there is this one in the literature, which was described by, is it Lenz and Melchin? Yes, Lenz and Melchin, 1986. And this is a single specimen of a synrhabdosome which they were given, so we don't know what the whole bedding plane looks like. And what you have here is a dozen specimens of one species where there isn't really a gap at the end. They've also have different growth stages, but there's no sort of central space. It's not the best picture, I think it's fair to say. And what do you think about this one?
I really want to see a better picture, but I'm not necessarily convinced that's a synrhabdosome, because we're not seeing what's going on in the middle, probably because of the quality of the picture. And if you had a sufficiently dense number of graptolites on a bedding plane, you might get some overlying each other like this just by chance.
And there are others on the same bedding plane, it's fair to say. You can see them at the edge.
There obviously are a lot of graptolites here, and if this was the only assemblage like this on the entire bedding plane, then maybe I'd want to see a close-up of what's going on where the colonies are overlapping, I think. I'm not, from the evidence available to me, I am not convinced that this is a synrhabdosome.
Okay, I think I'm more sort of positive about it because of one feature, which is that all of the proximal ends that you can see, I mean there's one or two like this thing overlapping another one, but all of the proximal ends that you can see are pointing outwards. So they're all in the same orientation. If this was a random assortment of graptolites just fell on top of each other, you'd expect some to be pointing the other way, I would think.
This is where I'd really want to be seeing the entire bedding plane. Because if you get lots of assemblages like this, and in some of them they're pointing inwards and outwards randomly, it's not a synrhabdosome.
True. Or yeah, or at least those aren't. Because if these are some sort of associations which are accidental, then possibly they are synrhabdosomes if they're formed in a similar way. It's just that would be, yeah, it's a question of whether there's anything biological going on here, or whether this is some sort of fortuitous arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
But this goes back to the question we were asking, really, was whether, the reason we mentioned this was because there is usually a space in the centre, because the synrhabdosome, or the graptolites, grow towards the middle.
Mm-hmm. If they were growing as part of the synrhabdosome.
Yeah, that's yes, if it was a biological thing. However, the other answer to that is, okay, this is one in which there doesn't seem to be a space in the middle if it is genuinely a synrhabdosome. But the other answer to that is that it was temporary, that they could tangle themselves for a stage of their life cycle and then remove themselves from the synrhabdosome and drift away again afterwards.
In some ways that's even more problematic, because you've then got to the graptolites getting themselves in contact with their virtually non-existent swimming abilities, holding themselves together with some sort of temporary glue, and then going away again, having not got irrevocably tangled in the meantime, because you can get synrhabdosome-like things forming in graptolites that have been dissolved out of limestone and are just sitting in a jar of ethanol or acid or whatever you use. And they're obviously, the graptolites have been dead for millions of years. It's obviously not any sort of biological activity. You've got lots of threads and they're getting tangled.
Okay, do we have pictures of that? Can we see how synrhabdosome-like they are? Or is it been published, or is it sort of...
certainly remember Barry Rickards talking about it.
Yes.
I think he's mentioned it in passing in some of his papers. I'm not sure if there are any pictures.
I think I would like to see what they actually look like. I can imagine tangles, but I would expect random tangles with something like Graptolite, where you've got spines on the thecae, to tangle themselves up by the thecae as well.
But the thecal spines are very short relative to the Nema.
They are, but there's a lot of them. And they're hooked. So you might get much more easy tangling there than you would from the Nemas, which aren't actually hooked.
Possible, but then it's also true to say that most Graptolites, most monograptids and Graptolites don't have spines in their thecae, so that's not going to apply. And I don't know which species he was seeing this in.
Okay, yeah. So there's a lot of unknowns on that one. And I've heard that as well, I think he told me. But when it's not actually properly documented, it's difficult to know what to make of it. Because I can easily imagine that you have a jar full of Graptolites isolated from limestone. They will tangle in some way. But when he says Synrhabdosome-like, I'd want to see a stellate arrangement tangled all by the Nemas.
Well, I can imagine it. Even if they were some sort of biological life assemblage, they were possibly not a stellate arrangement in life, because the Graptolites would have been in the water. They could have been at different orientations relative to each other. It might have been some sort of three-dimensional star.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A three-dimensional stellate is fine.
Yes, all right. Yeah.
Yeah. So another peculiarity is that although they're mostly in diplograptids or monograptids with a long Nema for ease of tangling, they can occur in other ways as well. Can they tangle by the Vagella?
There is one documented occurrence in the literature of a Synrhabdosome formed by the Vagella, which is in a Graptolite called Rhapidograptus turnquistai, which is an early Silurian one, described by, I can never remember how to pronounce her name, Militi Bereshkov, I think.
I believe you.
Yeah, and in this case it's Graptolites just tangled by the Vagella. So what is odd, if they're just random fortuitous arrangements, is lots of Graptolites have got a long Nema, and lots of Graptolites have got a long Vagella. And what I don't think you ever see is a Synrhabdosome that's a mixture of Nema and Vagella.
Yeah, and we've got quite a lot of Graptolites in the built-in layer that have a long Nema and a long Vagella. So that is peculiar. The more consistency you get in a feature like that, the more interesting it gets.
Yes.
So, as I said, most of these are monograptids and diplograptids, but there are exceptions, and those exceptions are really interesting. So let's have a look at this paper by Zalasiewicz. So in this one, we have two different species of what are called dichograptids, branched ones. And most of their Synrhabdosomes are from Didymograptus simulans, or afsimulans. One is very similar to it anyway.
So this is one that's shaped like a moustache, really.
Yeah.
So sort of circular in the middle, and then one branch going out, more not quite horizontally to each side.
Yeah.
So in this case, this is one of the Graptolites in which the branches do not grow along the Nema. The Nema is just sort of short little thing.
And the branches, in fact, grow away from the Nemas. So he's got these arrays here of quite a few specimens, up to about 10 or so, all with the sicula pointing inwards to a central point. And the Nema in these things that's one of the most interesting points of this, isn't it? Is normally a very slender, simple, straight Nema, not all that long either, because you don't tend to have a long Nema in these groups. But where you have the Synrhabdosomes, they go all tangled. And he says they're quite often thickened.
Yeah, no, he's only illustrating this by means of drawings, not photographs, because this was the early 80s and photography was probably a bit difficult before digital photography. And he's got this in two taxa, the Didymograptus afsimulans, which is the moustache-like thing, and then the other one is a thing called Aggregates, in which you've got one very short branch, which barely exists at all, and another longer branch. So, yeah, you got a similar sort of structure in two dichograptids.
Yeah, and you look at that, and the Nema is a very small part, of a very short length relative to the length of the stipes. You're going to tangle those. I mean, look at part A. And that is just a lovely sort of radial array with all the siculae pointing into this one little point in the centre. That is a very difficult random tangle.
If you had huge numbers of graptolites, as you can get, of course, if you had a sufficient number of specimens, you could get all sorts of random tangles that you just go, oh, that one must be fortuitous. But in this case, because the nemata seem to be a bit better developed than in just plain examples of the species, there does seem to be something else going on here.
Yeah, I really like that sort of thickened and twisted and sort of loopy nemata, because normally they're really quite simple.
Mm-hmm. And Zalasiewicz in this paper actually thought that these Synrhabdosomes were some sort of temporary structure, maybe for reproduction, and they would actually separate out by some means later.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be really difficult to separate yourself. These things can't have been swimming very well.
Okay, but separating, haven't you told me in the past that they could actually chew through or resorb or destroy parts of their colony?
Yes.
So they could just cut them off and float away.
Maybe.
And then grow a new one.
And it would be very difficult to tell when you just have a single graptolite if that it's done that. You might just think, the nema's not preserved there.
Quite often you get specimens without a nema.
Sometimes, anyway.
Yeah, where you might expect one.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly very variable in length.
Yes.
So, yeah.
It's impossible to test. Well, in that case, what we might then expect to find would be just the tangle of nemata preserved sometimes.
We might. Would people see them? Would they take any notice of them?
See them, yes. Take notice of, probably not. You probably wouldn't bother to collect them.
Yeah, I mean,
or you might think, oh, chitinous hydroids.
Oh, those again. There's another video about them. But yeah, it's... If you just had these tiny little strands all in a little sort of knot, it might be very difficult to see what was going on with them.
So what you'd want to do would be to go somewhere like this place in Mid Wales where you've got lots of Synrhabdosomes, or somewhere else where there are lots of Synrhabdosomes, and see if there are any of these tangles. But those tangles would only exist if Synrhabdosomes were some sort of deliberate thing on the part of the Graptolites. Or, I suppose they could have been non-deliberate, but the Graptolites had some way of getting out of them.
Yep.
Which if the Graptolites never got out of them, you wouldn't find these tangles. So the existence of sort of just bundles in the matter would be really informative, but their absence doesn't necessarily tell us much.
Which is not the most satisfying scientific approach, but it's still useful to look, because you never know.
Sometimes it's the best you can do.
Yeah. Okay, there is also another weird example to look at, which is Dendroids. Here we go. This is from the Fezouata biota of Morocco, early Ordovician, a supposedly planktonic dendroid. Calyx dendron, which apparently has been discussed as being planktonic before. And you have these radial arrays of these multi-branched things, quite large colonies.
And this isn't the only dendroid-like thing that's been shown to form Synrhabdosomes. You've got it in Rhabdinoptera as well, which is another planktic, very closely related to dendroids. So multi-branched, sort of conical tubarium form, probably not hydrodynamic at all.
But then what we see in some of these, particularly this part C, the lower left, is there appears to be a really thickened structure where they are joined together, as if they have overgrown the join part and actually made a solid structure out of it.
And they do have multiple specimens.
They do, lots of them. There are thousands of these Graptolites, and apparently they're quite common to get these associations.
Yes, I mean we've seen similar associations of dendroids, or anisograptids, technical term, in the Moluccan Desert, but that was a different species.
Okay, yeah. And we didn't see Synrhabdosome-like arrangements there, did we?
No, we didn't.
No. One thing we have seen is some that look very like this that have a holdfast.
Well, that's the different species.
Okay, right, but not this one.
No.
Okay, so what do you make of that? If they truly were planktic, then they are apparently combining and attaching to each other in life by the sicula area. But could they have been benthic things, so actually colonies growing on the sea floor, and then they all collapse into a star-shaped arrangement when they're buried?
Maybe, I mean, the authors are interpreting these as having been transported in or having sunk down into soupy sediment, because you do actually get some of that preserved upright, and you're just seeing the branches in cross section.
Yes. Yeah, I think there was something like 14 were pointing up that way up and 4 were that way up. Something like that.
Mm.
So
that was for the Synrhabdosomes, not the
yes.
individual colonies.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Mm.
So it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because that is potentially very compelling as evidence that these were biological structures.
Mm-hmm.
And you combine that with Selassie-Abich's one, with the multi-branched ones as well. It starts looking really interesting.
It does, yes.
Okay, one sort of almost compromise view
Mm.
is this thing that Sue Rigby suggested.
Yep.
Which is that they are being stuck together by marine snow.
What is marine snow?
It's basically lots of detritus, often sticky detritus, things like the food capturing mucus nets of lots of marine organisms that secrete lots of mucus to capture food particles and then suck it back in again.
There's a lot of poo as well.
That too, yeah. But there is a lot of this marine snow which can actually look like snow in some places. It's falling down to the sea. And it can be sticky.
Mm-hmm.
So Sue Rigby actually suggested that these were being tangled together by the nemata because they're being captured, if you like, stuck to bits of marine snow. And that was how they're all getting combined into these sort of ball-like arrangements.
You could see that working, yes.
My problem with it is that why would it always be by the nemata? Why not by the thecae? By random orientations?
Because the nemas are the longest bits and most likely to get tangled, and if they get tangled together by the thecae, you're just going to go, two specimens just lying next to each other. In some ways, we're doing the human thing of pattern recognition here.
Maybe, but it doesn't explain the situations like this quarry here, where you have quite rare or sparse graptolites and a few perfect Synrhabdosomes, which do seem to be all tangled by the nemas.
Yeah, and it's the same with the examples that Linson Gutierrez Marco describes from Spain. That was huge numbers of Synrhabdosomes.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't explain all the options to me. Because although you say the nemas are the really long bit, the thecae are spikier. They've got lots of projections. There's also more mass behind it. So as that's making contact with something, it's going to dig in. And you would think that marine snow would capture these things on all sides in all sorts of orientations. They wouldn't just have all the nemata pointing in and tangling in the centre.
Mm.
They would all be stuck around the edge of a ball rather than directed into the middle with a ball surrounding them, or surrounding the contact point. You'd have to explain that as a lump of marine snow, you'd have to stab the nemata in from all sides and then mix in the middle to me. So I'm not totally convinced. It's a really nice idea, but I don't think it actually works.
Yeah, but then I don't see them forming biologically either, just because you need time to stick things together. So I think that it's one of these things that you get a bit of evidence and you find it convincing, and then there's another bit of evidence and it's convincing the other way, and I don't know what evidence we could get that would resolve it either way.
You see, yeah, as we said at the beginning, we're not going to come to a definite answer here.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth sort of summarising our final takes on it, because Lucy will have the final word, I'm sure. But my point of view is that the evidence that I can see from the different types of density and the different proportions of graptolites within an assemblage that are formed in Synrhabdosomes, all of the peculiarities about the monospecific assemblages, they can all be kind of explained in different ways, but in summary, all of that to me points towards it being biological. And I don't think that there's quite so much of a problem with the how did they do it lark, because we simply don't know enough about the biology of the zooids. They may have been highly specialised in various ways. It's speculative, but it's also a complete unknown. It would be equally speculative to me to say that they couldn't do it, because this is a group that has adapted to the plankton, and they presumably had all sorts of modifications to their soft tissue that we don't know about. So I'm sort of leaving that open to me, as it's not quite a get out of jail free card, but it is a way of saying, well, we don't know that they would have found it very difficult to manoeuvre. We just don't have the evidence for me.
Well, I'm going to go the other way and say that I don't see any reason that they can be biological. Simply because how on earth did they do it? We do know a bit about what Graptolite zooids were like, thanks to their modern relatives. And they just can't have been that manoeuvrable. But what you can have had, of course, is having things getting tangled fortuitously, and then the nemur becomes thickened. So it's also possible, of course, that you can have sometimes something happens randomly, and sometimes it's deliberate, and we'd never be able to tell.
Possibly. How about nautiloid crochet?
I like that idea.
Yeah. It is deliberate, but not by the Graptolites.
Let's go with that.
Problem solved. So there we go. We did warn you that there probably wasn't going to be a definite answer on this one, because nobody else has managed it, so why should we? But it's a really interesting subject, I think. Any last words?
Graptolites are amazing.
Fair enough. That's what I get when I let her get the last word. Alright, bye for now.